Today we're going to look at one of the most immediate and powerful elements in visual storytelling: color. While many filmmakers embrace a more bold and bright color palette, director David Fincher takes a different approach.
Mark!
Let's hear from Fincher and his collaborators on the role of color in their work. This is Colors of Fincher. To stay in the loop, don't forget to subscribe and enable notifications. One of the first things to notice about David Fincher's colors is that desaturation is a guiding principle for his overall palette. It gives Fincher's work a very distinct look, but beyond aesthetics, there is also storytelling value to these decisions.
Now, most of you think you know the rest of the story, but you may not.
In The Social Network, the desaturated colors support the film's underlying themes.
They're saying that we stole the Facebook from Divya Narendra and the Winklevoss.
I know what it says.
Did we?
Did we what?
Don't screw around with me now.
Here's DP Jeff Cronenweth on that choice. The moral compass of the story is murky and grey, so we needed to match this with the visual tones and still have something exciting to look at. We decided to mute the color palette quite heavily in the college scenes and keep a limited depth of field to make the place feel claustrophobic in contrast to San Francisco.
And you're not a hugger. I know.
1 million!
In Seven, this restricted approach to color augments the bleakness of the script. According to production designer Arthur Max,
it wasn't really a black and white movie, but the color of the film was very controlled and accented. So the palette of the film was very limited, taking color down and trying to darken the world that we lived in, both for psychological reasons and also for photographic reasons. We tried to reserve the warm colors, and particularly red, for the blood in the movie.
Detective!
You're looking for me.
It was a no-color movie, and that was very much David's idea, to restrict the use of color as much as possible so that when you did use it, it had some impact.
one way Fincher strategically uses color for maximum impact is through his characters. When it comes to visually defining a character, we often look at both their costume and makeup, as well as their environments. Case in point, the red dress in The Curious Case of Benjamin Button.
Here's the red dress. I'm against red in movies as a color because I think it's often overused. It tends to be distracting, and it's oftentimes, if it's used for distraction, it's fine. But it was a beautiful gown, and it looked fantastic on her, and it was so the period. And, you know, it's not the dress, it's how it's worn. And it's who wears it.
Red is reserved almost exclusively for Daisy, a simple way to communicate how singular and important she is in Benjamin's life. In Fight Club, color and costumes become an immediate and visual way to separate the narrator from Tyler, as explained by costume designer Michael Kaplan.
I was surprised that Dave allowed all those reds and oranges and vibrant colors that Brad wears. When you'd walk into the wardrobe trailer and look at Brad's side was like vibrant, and Edward's side was just grays and beiges and so boring. I mean, it was hysterical. I mean, you couldn't believe those two characters were in the same movie.
According to Arthur Max, the color palette in Detective Somerset's apartment is used to inform his pessimistic worldview.
When it came to Morgan Freeman's set, the Somerset apartment building, it really helped to kind of generate a mood of frustration and lack of hope for the character to deal with these kind of heavy, thick brown colors, and without any use of vivid colors in the palette. We were very restricted to earth tones and deep greens, and on occasion we would use a kind of maroon.
You may not have noticed the muted and restricted colors in Somerset's apartment, but you probably felt them. This is a great example of the storytelling that is done invisibly in the background. We've seen that Fincher is quite reserved with color overall, but where we see it most is in his settings. In many scenes, Fincher will often color the entire location with a single hue. Think of the golden, nostalgic warmth of Benjamin Button, the oppressive orange heat in Alien 3, or the fluorescent green hell of Panic Room. In The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, the environment is a major element. According to Fincher, the notion of these horrors taking place in an environment that's icy, snowy, and somewhat inhospitable just seemed right to me. To augment the cold and isolation, cinematographer Jeff Cronenweth pushed the color of the light towards blue. Although Sweden has a cool, desaturated palette in winter, we use the 80D filter to raise the color temperature about 400 degrees Kelvin, which gave a little more blue light to the sensor. In Fight Club, cinematographer Jeff Cronenweth explains the contrasting moods between the narrator's corporate world and Tyler's world.
For a lot of the corporate sequences, we put in regular chroma fluorescence, didn't correct anything, let cool white stay in there, and then made slight adjustments on the camera to get this kind of forced, unnatural, greenish tonality to their skins and to the walls. We were kind of presenting, this unfriendly work environment that he lives in.
Where to begin?
It's such a contrast when you end up back in Lou's Tavern for the fight sequences, which are all lit by these fairly warm tungsten small practical sources that are placed in the ceilings. In one way, it brings you back to this is their comfortable, wombish world, even though fighting takes place here, versus this sterile corporate world that he's trying to push himself away from.
For one of the most disturbing crime scenes in Seven, Fincher and his team created a nightmarish scene accented with color. Here's DP Darius Konji. This was a very necrotic, green scene, like being under the bottom of a river. It had a moist, fungal look. I added a bit of green gel to all the lights, just to give the feeling of angst. It was perfect with that feeling of rot.
Oh, me.
In some cases, Fincher and his collaborators combined colors to create specific moods, as Mindhunter DP Eric Messerschmidt explains. We mix color temperatures, cool and warm, in the same shot, often by letting the windows go a little blue and letting the interior practicals stay yellow. The idea was to let colors isolate the actors and let the interior feel lonely during interrogation scenes.
Please, have a seat.
David Fincher is a precise director, and we can see this precision in his compositions, camera movements, and his color. Of all the elements in visual storytelling, color plays a major role. Which color to use? How saturated or desaturated? How will the colors work in combination? No matter the palette you choose, these decisions should be made in advance. Bring color into your storyboards and collaborate with your team. Studio Binder was designed to facilitate this process. Subscribe as we continue our lessons on filmmaking techniques, and don't forget to enable notifications. Being left out of the loop might find you seeing red. See you in the next one.